I'm Mark Poppenborg, and I am extremely excited to welcome you to this first episode of MarkUp, the show that offers a different perspective on mainstream management and leadership publications. And my team and I have been working on this for a long time, and I'm glad that everything's finally coming together. This show is being launched in what we were hoping to be quieter times, but it isn't. It's being launched in the midst of a global pandemic that we're still stuck in. Hairdressers are still closed. It's a problem for everyone, but we're gonna get through it. We're gonna be all right. And in the midst of this, there's still a lot of problems to be solved, problems that have been there for a long time, managerial problems, and also problems that you as a manager, as a leader, as a company owner might be facing for the very first time. And I'm gonna do my very best to deconstruct some of the most read articles that are published on leadership and on organizational design, on organizational change, and on business transformation. And I'm going to try and give you a different perspective that is useful to you and that makes you lead and build your company more successfully. Right, let's jump straight in. And today I've got two stories I want to cover. And story number one in episode number one of this show is an article that I came across in the Harvard Business Review. And this article was titled, "What We Learned About Bureaucracy from 7,000 HBR, that being Harvard Business Review, readers." And this article is from 2017, August 2017 to be precise. So it's not the most recent article. And is written by Gary Hamel and Michelle Cennini, co-authors of Humanocracy. And they've got a beautiful subtitle to that book. It's called Creating Organizations as Amazing as the People Inside Them. I think that's a pretty damn good subtitle. Gary Hamel is a very famous author and speaker and business thinker. If you don't know him, it's time you did. He, according to the Wall Street Journal, he's the #1 business thinker. He's a management consultant. He's been around for a long time. I don't agree with everything he says, but I think he is a well of inspiration, and his article, this specific article I'm referring to today, is music to my ears. I can say that much. And what he did is in 2017, in May 2017, he conducted a survey on the Harvard Business Review, asking readers about the bureaucracy in their company. And him and his colleague made some interesting findings. The first finding was that large companies suffer from managerial diseconomies of scale. And I think this is a beautiful way to term something that we've all experienced in the past and that bothers us. We all talk about economies of scale. We learn that at school or in university, and we're taught that things that are similar, tasks that are similar, have to be pulled together, that they have to be departmentalized, that they have to be streamlined, and that this is the way to bring economic success. And what we fail to understand, very often at least, is that diseconomies of scale are apparent as soon as we overdo bureaucracy, or let's be more specific, if we apply bureaucracy in the wrong way. And I'm going to get to this in a minute. Bureaucracy is growing, not shrinking. That's another finding that this article makes. And interestingly, to highlight one specific section of this article, interestingly, individuals working in customer service, sales, production, logistics, and R&D were more likely to feel that bureaucracy was growing than those working in functions like HR, finance, planning, purchasing, and administration. In other words, the individuals who feel most hamstrung by bureaucracy are the ones most directly involved in creating customer value. Now that is worrying news. Basically, we're saying those who do the work that should be customer facing are the ones most inward facing because they're consumed by bureaucracy. Now, why is that the case? And I think I have a personal opinion on this, and it's because the more desperate we are for something to work, which is a project which is highly relevant to the company, for example, the more we follow the paradigm that we've subscribed to because we're so desperate for it to work. And most companies have subscribed to the idea that you can only achieve greatness and you can only achieve great success if you control every aspect of value generation. And this opens the door to the whole spectrum of management instruments like performance indicators and performance management systems and feedback systems and reporting systems and all these systems. In other words, a lot of bureaucracy that leads to people being consumed by bureaucracy and being less able to spend time on the actual value generation. And the interesting thing is, and I've seen this time and time again, you've got a really important project to solve, to tackle, to lead. And because this project is so important for the company, it gets a lot of attention. And because it gets a lot of attention, all the bureaucratic power is poured out onto this project, hoping for the best, but achieving the worst. And this pays testament to the fact that bureaucracy is inadequate to face the challenges of our complex and volatile times. What the article also found is that organizations are not becoming any flatter. You know, we keep talking about flat organizations and less hierarchies, and the opposite is the case. Not surprisingly, they found that bureaucracy is a time trap, that people are spending a lot of time being consumed by bureaucracy. And one interesting finding I want to highlight is that the average time for getting approval from an unbudgeted expenditure was 20 days or more in large organizations, whereby it was 13 days in companies with fewer than 100 employees, as if 13 days was little time. I mean, we're talking about unbudgeted expenditures. If it's budgeted, then it's according to plan. I mean, then I'm expecting to spend something at a certain time. If it's unbudgeted, then we are in the realm of surprises. We're dealing with problems we've never seen before, and we want to act before the shit hits the fan. So we need money now. We need to be able to make decisions quickly, and bureaucracy stops us from doing that. And that's why a lot of companies are struggling with being more adaptable and more agile and more flexible, and therefore more customer facing. The article goes on pointing out that bureaucracy produces parochialism, meaning that everything is inward focused. So the attention of staff, the intention of communication is inward facing rather than outward facing, which would be more important for the business. And then the article goes on pointing to further symptoms of bureaucracy and names quite a few of them. And I'd recommend you just have a look at the article yourself. It's in the show notes. And towards the end of the article, it addresses the most important of all questions, I'm assuming, which is the question on how bureaucracy can be overcome. And this is where I, at least partly, part ways with Hamill and Sonnini, at least in this article I do. And I trust that they would agree with the following, and they probably mention it in different publications, but I didn't find anything about this here. And it's the absence of a very important distinction that has to be made. In my opinion, if we declare bureaucracy as the evil, then all we achieve is the same outcome in a different way. We will achieve an unsuccessful outcome in which companies are in a chaotic situation, because what they will be doing is they're going to be trying to solve problems that have been solved before by thinking of new ways of solving them, although the answer is already there. You know, they could just use knowledge that has been acquired in the past. And that's why we need to make a distinction between what I call routine work and creative work. Now, I don't mean creative work in the sense that we are talking about, you know, big marketing campaigns or R&D, product development, anything like that. That's also creative work, but creative work is also a daily part of our value generation. Every time we are faced with a problem that we haven't solved before, we are dependent on having an idea. And we can't look at any rules or checklists or guidelines that have been handed out by management, because these are all capturing knowledge of the past. So we need to get rid of bureaucracy, but only bureaucracy that is targeted at creative work. The bureaucracy that is targeted at routine work is highly effective and will always be effective. So it's really important to make this distinction before we tackle bureaucracy. And that's the only way to make a company more successful. All right, let's move on to the second story. And this is a story that I'm a lot less positive about. Quite frankly, I think it's full of BS. And it's a story that I found in the Harvard Business Review as well. I'm not leaning towards the Harvard Business Review in any way. It's just that I found these two stories. And this one is a lot more recent. It's from January 2021. And it's titled, "Stop Making Excuses for Toxic Bosses." Now, this article is making a case for the unacceptable behavior of what they call abusive leadership by toxic bosses. And let me read a section to you that stood out to me. Our research shows that there is little organizational leaders can do to break the cycle of self-centered, manipulative, God, it's late, and uncivil behaviors other than implementing zero tolerance policies for toxic supervisory behavior and consistently adhering to those policies even when bosses appear to strive to make up for their bad behaviors. Let me rephrase that. So even if someone tries to apologize or make good for what he's done, although the article, in all fairness, does specifically say a true apology is something different. However, what they are saying is that a boss that is misbehaving and conducting some kind of abuse to their employee, whatever that means specifically, can only, and this is what I want to point out, can only be addressed by a zero tolerance policy. It says there is little organizational leaders can do other than a zero tolerance policy. Now, I think that's a bold statement. And let's have a closer look at the assumption that these authors are making, because I think there's a lot more that bosses or organizational leaders can do. The assumption that these authors are making is that the boss's behavior is a direct result of their character. And by applying a zero tolerance policy, this will stop bosses from abusing employees in the future. And I think it's important to take a different perspective here and look at this whole thing from another perspective, which is assuming that there might be another reason for why the bosses are behaving the way they are behaving. And from many theoretical and empirical backgrounds, we can make the fair claim that there's two main determining factors for behavior. One, yes, is their character. Like every human being has a character, and every human being or every human being's behavior is shaped by his character. But most likely, and a lot more dominantly, there is a huge influence from the system that surrounds this person. So what if bosses didn't behave like they do because they are assholes, but maybe they behave like that because the system encouraged them to behave like assholes? So it's a question of perspective, and I chose these articles in this order for a specific reason. Because if you work in a very bureaucratic structure that doesn't match the demands of work, and you are on a daily basis facing challenges of value generation that can't be addressed properly because half of your time you are drawn to bureaucratic structures, then you get frustrated. And there's a constant contradictory set of expectations that bosses are confronted with. One being the expectation to control and monitor and report and audit and be in charge of the value generation. And the other is to let go, is to ask questions, is to lead by example, etc., etc. And that lays the ground for bosses that can't get it right. I mean, you can't say, be a modern boss, follow a new paradigm, be empathetic, listen to your staff, let them make decisions, and at the same time, you are telling them to be the same old boss. That just doesn't work. So the solution to this is not blaming the individual boss, but rather by changing the framework in which bosses are bosses, which is the point I'm trying to make. What challenges me to speak out on this is the hypocrisy that is being made here. It's hypocritical of authors making these claims, and it's a very typical example of where alleged experts are guilty of the very offence they accuse others of, and that in this case is accusing the bosses for being hostile to their employees by blaming the bosses. I mean, you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that produces it. Right, so let's wrap this up. You can tell I'm starting to get a bit angry here. Have some sympathy with bosses, not just with employees. It's not only more humane, it's more effective too. And I think if we take a different perspective and we look at bosses' behavior from a more holistic point of view and tie that together with the bureaucratic structures that many businesses are applying, then suddenly this behavior becomes a lot more explainable and is less dependent on trying to change people's character or just applying a zero policy towards abuse. That's not the only way forward. That's not the only thing that we can do. It's not the only way to escape the toxic behavior of bosses. All right, enough for today. I hope you enjoyed episode number 1. Send us your thoughts in the comments section below, and if you find any articles that you'd like to get a second opinion on, and then send them to us, and we'll check them out, and we'll have a closer look at them, and maybe we can feature them in this show. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.